Commerce Talks, the Ontario Chamber of Commerce podcast, where we talk about some of the most important issues facing the economies of Ontario and Canada. I'm Daniel Tisch, President and CEO of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. On today's show, we're talking about workplaces as learning spaces, cultivating the skills that matter for businesses and for workers. The labor market is changing fast. We see this all the time. We see the way artificial intelligence is reshaping businesses and workplaces and the whole economy. And for businesses, this means skills gaps and labor shortages that limit their productivity and their growth potential. For workers, there's a real risk of being left behind, whether it's young people looking for their first job or mid-career workers who need to upskill and reskill themselves. It's all a little bit scary, but there is some good news. Earlier this year, I was excited to join a Queen's Park News conference where I introduced the Ontario Minister of Finance and the Minister of Colleges and Universities as they announced long-term investments in post-secondary education, something we've been advocating aggressively for the last 2 years. And going back just a few months before that, the federal government in Canada announced in its budget an extension and expansion of the Student Work Placement Program. The Ontario Chamber is proud to be a partner in that program because it funds work-integrated learning opportunities that benefit both employers and students. So thanks to this kind of support, the hard work of our post-secondary institutions and their industry partners, nearly half of Ontario students, 45% by one estimate, are now participating in some form of work-integrated learning. And I admit that's more than I thought it would be, but less than we need. The question is, how can we extend and expand these programs so that we can reach the other 55% of Ontario students? Because experiences such as co-ops and internships, they create these bridges that we need between education and employment. They equip learners with real-world skills and with professional networks and with confidence they need for an uncertain workplace and an uncertain world. After the post-secondary funding announcement, I had the chance to meet again with the Finance Minister, Peter Bethlenfalvy, just to emphasize how much this matters to our Ontario businesses, because we need these grads to be workplace ready and to deliver value on day one. So we still see challenges. We know that colleges and universities still struggle to expand capacity and maintain program quality. We know that access to work-integrated learning opportunities remains uneven across our communities and our province, and employer participation still remains limited. There's still lots of barriers. So how can work-integrated learning deliver the skilled and diverse workforce our economy needs? What are the barriers to creating meaningful and productive experiences for both students and employers? And what factors are going to shape the future of skills development in Ontario? And so to unpack all this, I'm joined by three great conversationalists, three great partners, three great leaders. Anna Serrano, President and Vice Chancellor of OCAD University. Kelly Hoey, who is Executive Director of HIAC, which runs ApprenticeSearch.com and the Ontario Career Lab. And Noor Haj, President and CEO of Civic Connect. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Happy to be here.
Thank you for having us.
So let's kick off just, a lot of people will hear, what we're talking about. They'll hear about work-integrated learning and they'll be a little fuzzy as to what it is. And so let's start with that. Let's see if we can level set and understand what it is. And maybe the best way to start is, give us an example from your experience of a success of worker-integrated learning that's been truly successful. And Anna, maybe I'll start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Daniel. I mean, I think when people, let me put it to you this way. Most people out there probably don't even know the term work-integrated learning. Instead, they've heard of terms like co-ops or internships, and in some cases, project-based learning. And so at OCAD, that's one of our most, I think, exciting examples of WIL, as we would say in industry, are these project-based employee, industry, and student initiatives. And really, it comes from the point that most businesses have problems they want to solve. And in some instances, they actually could benefit from a student team helping them solve that problem. Mm-hmm. So this was the case for Forum Asset Management. They had a student housing facility in Cabbagetown called Alpha, I believe is the name. And they had single bed rooms that they needed to turn into double occupancy rooms. And so the design of how to actually turn these micro apartments into double occupancy was something they could either do themselves, or they could actually work with students who understand what it's like to be in student housing, to actually design the best possible solution for them. Right. And so they came to OCAD through our Design For program and worked with our environmental design students, and in some cases, industrial design students, led by a faculty member who has this kind of skill and expertise. And together, they solved the problem of designing for that particular from single occupancy to double occupancy. And they came up with all sorts of really interesting design innovations, including where the desk would sit and how privacy would be maintained, and where you might actually store things. And to this day, those particular designs are going to be implemented by Forum Asset Management.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, and I'm heartened to hear that, because both Forum Asset Management and OCAD are members of the Ontario Chamber. So it's great that you're working together. They're clearly visionaries. Kelly, give us your perspective. What's an example from your perspective? I mean, obviously, you deeply understand the needs of employers, and I'm wondering if you can share a perspective on that.
Absolutely. Happy to do that and build on Anna's great example. I think the point of common language is really important when we talk about experiential learning and work integrated learning. HIAC, as an industry education council, was set up some 36 years ago to help extend learning beyond the classroom. And that's the umbrella under which we do all of our work. And really, that can be a small experience, a medium-sized experience, or a long-term or larger experience, which is a co-op placement, some of the things that people are most familiar with. Our example, probably our most recent example, is a historic investment by the Government of Ontario to create the Ontario Career Lab, which I know many of our Ontario Chamber of Commerce members and Chamber of Commerce members throughout Ontario have been involved in. And that's a simple start to the language of extending learning beyond the classroom and giving young people an opportunity to connect to people in the world of work and extend their scope beyond the classroom. So the Ontario Career Lab is operating to deliver career conversations to all grade 9 and 10 students across Ontario. That's 315,000 students. They're getting a little taste of what experiential learning might look like, where you can actually talk to an employer and find out about their career journey. So we're really excited about that, beginning early piece, and then hopefully seeing that will lead to more involvement in experiential learning, not just by our young people, but by the employers that come and get a taste of what experiential learning can be like. The commitment can range from a short-term to a long-term placement. It can be just an interaction, and it can also lead to placements and employment. So I think absolutely, it's language that we need to bring together so that we can help the line between education and work fade faster.
Yeah, and it really needs to, right? And I'm really struck by how we just need these permeable pathways throughout somebody's career between places of work and places of learning, right? So it's amazing the progress we're seeing, and what a great example. Noor, I'm going to open up with you now. You run something called the Youth Skills Studio, which I know has a great track record at delivering work integrated learning. Tell us a little bit about that and how it works.
Yeah, so Civic Connect as a whole, our mandate is as a youth skills development and training organization. So that's kind of what we do across all of our various programs. The YSS, or the Youth Skills Studio, is kind of our flagship program. Essentially, what we believe is that people learn better by doing, and so we want to do that in the real world with small businesses, and we connect students and businesses together. But we do that in a novel way. We do that by employing those students in a longer term co-op. They become our employees, but they end up placed at those businesses. And while at the businesses, they're gaining all the technical skills from a competent technical supervisor who's delivering them all of the skills that they need to do that job. But we're then layering on 12 to 15 weeks of soft skills training, all the types of things that employers are typically complaining about when young people are coming out of the education system. Those are things like, timeliness, professionalism, work ethic, communication, lots of that. And so we deliver that, again, in an integrated environment, in the workplace. workplace where they're actually going to apply that skill. And then they're going to reflect on that in the workplace, not as a standalone workshop. And so we've had a lot of success running that program. A specific example would be we've recently just wrapped up a home build with Habitat for Humanity, where we've placed some students at a Habitat for Humanity worksite. They've constructed a home that a family in need is going to end up living in, that brings young people onto a community project, introduces them to the community. It develops their technical skills. It develops their soft skills. Habitat for Humanity, a great organization, gets the labor to finish that project. And of course, the family at the end of the day gets a home to live in.
Right. I want to drill down on what you were saying around small businesses, right? And obviously, you also, Kelly, I know will deal all the time with small businesses. What are the barriers, right? Like, so we're talking now, we're at 45%. We'd love to get, we'd love to double that if we could, right? So what does that look like? And what are the barriers? How do we overcome those barriers? What do small businesses say to you?
The most common things are actually that the language around bringing a student out of the education system is a little bit opaque, as in, like, they don't understand what a work integrated learning initiative is. They understand co-op, but what they understand by co-op is that they're going to get cheap labor, right? And that's not exactly what we mean when we say to get a valuable co-op experience for that young person. So that's a barrier for sure. The other one is, of course, time and money, right? Because when a small business, which, we're talking about small business, like, usually less than 10 employees. So the owner is, like, still involved. And if that owner is going to commit time to draft up a job description, go through the recruitment process, do the interviewing, have all the HR policies in place, then deal with the check-ins at the post-secondary, like, that's a lot of time. And the co-ops are, 12, 15 weeks long. So they need to really see a real ROI on that individual that they're bringing into their business. Otherwise, they don't want to participate.
Right.
Yeah.
So, sorry, you were going to.
No, I was just going to say that's why I really kind of framed my original introduction along the lines of problem solving.
Yeah.
Because I think if it's project-based problem-solving approaches to work integrated learning, then small businesses kind of get that. And it's not just, so it can be everything from, I've never really invested in a website. I have no idea what AI is and what agents do.
Right. So they start with they start with a problem they want to solve.
Exactly.
And you help them solve that problem.
Exactly.
So how does the match happen, though?
Very carefully.
Yes.
So the most important thing is, I think, there does need to be a layer of mentorship, feedback, critique, support, etc. And sometimes that's done by faculty members. Sometimes it's done in partnership with not-for-profits like Civic Connect. And but you do need that layer so that the burden of managing that project or managing that engagement is not just on the hands of the small business owner who already has a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Right.
So you try to take that burden off their hands.
Exactly.
Right,
Exactly.
right.
And then that helps if you have that that layer or that person to kind of define the scope. Define what success means, define what skills are being learned, and what the outcomes should be. So that, to me, is a really successful setup.
Right. What's your pitch to employers?
I would add to that just having it as part of their talent infrastructure is just so important that employers can't afford not to do it.
Okay.
That we have to look at many employers, small majority of our employers in Ontario are small, medium-sized businesses. They don't often have HR departments. I think apprenticeship is a perfect example. Though the employers that we deal in within our skilled trades work are very much employers that have limited capacity to deal with growing their team. But they have a lot of potential. And so I think that when we have this age-old paradox where, and we can all remember it, you need experience to get a job. You need the opportunity to get a job to have experience. So that hasn't changed a lot. And I think we have to change our thinking on both sides to say that education can't do this alone. It can't be just employers, us participants. Employers have to be partners with our post-secondary institutes, with our high schools, with our all kinds of learning organizations to help people connect. Because if 34% of employers feel that youth are inadequately prepared. Yet through the Ontario Career Lab in grade 10, 9 and 10, we're hearing that 60% of youth have never spoken to an employer before that day.
That's amazing.
When they had the
Yeah.
conversation. There's the disconnect.
Sure.
And so you have to be involved
Yeah.
as an employer. You can't show up expecting graduates from our programs, our fabulous post-secondaries, to have them all work ready and academic.
So the employer gets a head start just as the student does as well,
That's
right?
right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that's really powerful. We were talking a little bit about cost barriers. Noor mentioned those for employers, and often that manifests itself in an unfortunate way. I ran a business for 20 years. It started as a small business, became a mid-sized business. We hired interns consistently in that time, but one of our policies was we're going to pay them. We're going to pay them a fair wage. Now, a lot of companies and our competitors did not. So from what I gather, there's still a lot of unpaid work that's happening out there, right? So do you see that? Do you hear that? What do we do about it? Because obviously there are some folks for whom it makes the whole prospect impossible.
Mm-hmm. I think, employers need to understand that they may be preventing themselves from hiring the talent that they really need. So the problem with this unpaid internship is that it's really an unequal kind of form of engaging with youth, because there's a lot of super talented youth out there who just can't afford to go on an unpaid internship.
Right.
So as an employer, you don't want to put yourself in a position where you're actually not hiring the best person for the job.
Sure, because the best ones will go to the paid opportunities. Right?
Exactly. So I think it's really critical to see this as a future proofing of your business.
Mhm.
And to really think about this as developing the type of talent pipeline that you need for increasing your productivity.
Right. Is there an issue though of protecting accessibility that universities and colleges have to deal with here?
Well, I mean, at OCAD University, we actually don't really engage in unpaid work integrated learning activities at all.
Yeah.
Although I have to say that from time to time, personally, I will say for myself, I have talked about the need to actually volunteer. Now, that's a slightly different thing than being an unpaid intern, right? So, because I do think that we need to create this this understanding that there are business activities we need to grow, but there are also civic activities that we need to grow, and that there is a continuum between those paid opportunities that allow me to build my skills, but also those volunteer opportunities that allow me to create the right type of society we want to live in.
Sure.
So I don't want to say that I'm against volunteering, because I think volunteering is actually quite important. And if I had my druthers, I would make sure that our students did both.
Yeah.
That they actually served as good volunteers, and it can be within a business context, but intentionally so. And they also serve as engaging and work integrated learning that pay them the work to develop.
Yeah, they've got there's got to be legitimate value for the students, doesn't there? Either way. Building on this idea of equity, I'm also curious to get feedback on, small towns, rural communities, indigenous communities, right? Like folks who are farther away, and it's just more difficult for them to find these opportunities. And I know, Kelly, you serve. Well, you started in Halton, you're everywhere now, and you serve people everywhere. So talk to us a little bit about those challenges when you've got to bridge these barriers of geography and community.
Yeah, happy to, because I think that part of it is sort of beginning how you plan to proceed. And it really builds on your point, Anna, that if in the high school system, we're teaching kids to volunteer, they have volunteer hours, and they hopefully all exceed that and get a thirst for community service. But at least they have some community experience that may help them realize what they're passionate about. When young people participate in high school co-ops, they're earning because they're getting credits for that placement. So we would like to have that continue to post-secondary opportunities where you are getting paid because you're getting something, you're not working, expected to do it for free, because that is a real disadvantage. And our marginalized groups become further marginalized, because if you can only afford to do the experiential learning piece, which has a higher likelihood of leading to a job at the graduation point, then, primarily, there's a lot more women in unpaid placements than there are other folks. And so, there's lots to unpack there. But I really do think that these communities have to be creative and innovative, and they have to work in partnership, because sometimes co-op placements need to be virtual.
Yeah.
Sometimes they need to be flexible, so that people can go for a whole day or go for a period of time. And that's one of the things that makes the whole will system tricky, is it's not a one size fits all. And programs have challenges sometimes connecting with employers, because they're different than other programs that they've evolved to. So the dream, I guess, would be to have some consistency in that infrastructure and support for both sides of that coin, where we have the academics and the work placement, and helping young people come out with both of those things kind of firmly intact.
Right. Noor, I imagine you've worked with so many students in your business. What observations or insights have you gained from those who come from faraway communities?
Yeah, so I mean, we're primarily focused on rural communities or semi-rural communities. Everything from in southwestern Ontario, excluding the GTA. So there's tons of challenges. I think, just speaking on behalf of the small businesses for a moment, one of the things that I hear consistently from them in regards to a whole bunch of things, but it's all under the same topic, which is that succession planning in general, not just for themselves as owners, but succession planning for their staff and for the future human capital of their businesses, is very hard for them to get their heads around sometimes, when they're spending so much of their time running their business. They're working in their business because of how small these companies are. And so to go to them and say, like, hey, this is something you should invest in. It's good for you in the next year and 2 years, when you're missing out on when you're experiencing this labor shortage in that acute moment. You have to start prepping for that now.
Yep.
That's difficult, right? Because they have so many other priorities in that moment. One of the things that we like to do at Civic Connect, and I think it's kind of the rigidity of the will structure that's difficult, is that we want to be flexible to employers. Like, we're kind of like a translator in between the education system and the small businesses, because we get to spend a lot of time with each business, with each small business that we work with, and a lot of time with each youth that we work with. And so we try to pair them and match them in the way that makes the most sense.
Sure. Great point. Thanks very much. I guess I wanted to pivot the conversation to talking about government and the role of government. We've seen some really important initiatives, policies, programs, investments by government recently and in recent years. And if you had 5 minutes now with the federal or the Ontario Minister of Finance, what would your pitch be when it comes to work integrated learning? What's the next step on the agenda that government needs to be thinking about? Maybe I'll start here.
Sure. I mean, the most important thing is that it's not one size fits all.
Right.
And then if you really think about, like, where does the funding go, if you will? If you had this pot of money, where would it go, right? And we really have 3 areas. The first is if you want to incentivize the employer to hire or to engage in this program. The second is if you want to ensure that the labor of the student is accounted for. And the third is that it's an actually expensive program to run. There are programmatic costs associated with it. So for me, I think it's really about understanding those 3 buckets and not shortchanging one bucket for the other 2 or for the other one,
And right now, I mean, there's this new operating funding, but it's not targeted.
No.
Is that, do you like it that way, or would you like to have some more dedicated resources that are targeted to these sorts of programs?
Well, I do think we have to be a little bit more intentional in the way we design our productivity ambitions.
Yep.
And so if we can tie this to notions of productivity, and also acknowledge that we are a small, medium enterprise economy,
Right.
then let's design a program that actually solves for that particular set of circumstances and for that particular outcome around productivity.
Great point, right? Because, you can address it at the local firm level,
Yeah.
but it also contributes to the economy-wide
Yeah.
challenge we have of low investment in productivity. No, that's great. What would your pitch be, Kelly?
My pitch would be that there is no better investment that we could make than helping people that are disconnected from the labor market, in particular our young people. There's no better investment that we can make. It falls out in so many different ways in the short term and the long term. The growing disconnect is something we should be concerned about. Our youth and people that are unemployed. I mean, we have 815,000 young people that are not in education, employment, or training, NEET, as we call them. That's 1 in 10 of our youth population. That's really concerning. And they're hearing the same narrative that we're all hearing. They're hearing about tariffs. They're hearing about declining employment rates. They're hearing about AI adoption. These are all things that they're hearing in the same narrative. And so there's no better investment that we could make than to help them and help those who help them do the work that they do and have an easier pathway to connecting to the labor market. I think it's just has to happen because the infrastructure needs to be there to support it happening and to have some consistency. And it can't be, partnership is something I can talk about all day, but it can't just be partnerships that sort of have a finite timeline. It has to be a long-term investment. So a long-term investment in innovative thinking around connecting young people to the labor market, best investment we could make.
So, Noor, it's the best investment we can make. I'm sure you'll agree with that, given your
agree,
business.
yeah.
So if the minister then says, okay, but I've got many ways I could structure this and areas in which I could invest, what would you say?
I would say, and this is something we actually tell our young people that are coming through the training program, that you get out of something what you put in.
Right.
And so there's no scenario where you can invest in what is admittedly a very expensive way of training people, other than actually making that investment. And I think the numbers are important. When we say like small businesses employ most people in Ontario, 90% of all the businesses in Ontario are small businesses, and 70% of the workforce in Ontario are employed at small businesses.
Yep.
So that's a dramatic amount of the population that is directly tied to these businesses being successful and being competitive and being productive.
Right.
And so investing in our labor is a direct causal link to the productivity problem that we have. And we don't make enough investments into our labor capital in Ontario and in Canada as a whole. Like we're actually quite uncompetitive there. And so what you need to do if you're I believe, if you're the Minister of Finance of any level of government, you need to invest in the long-term capital, human capital of the country.
Right.
Can I just add two things?
Yeah.
I think there are two words that are often forgotten in these conversations of work integrated learning, especially if we actually start with first principles, which is investing in human capital, investing in the future of our province, economic sovereignty, let's call it that. The two words are design and entrepreneurship. And the reason why I'm bringing in entrepreneurship as part of work integrated learning is because I think we think of labor as only something that is being done in a repetitive manner that's potentially administrative or trades focused or entry level focused, that's being provided by students to small businesses. But there's a real opportunity here to be thinking about product innovation and how original IP creation can be enhanced if we think about the integration of engineering, design, arts-based, or any kind of inventive skills that. Speaking for art and design universities, we teach, right? Those things, and as per my example, the double occupancy design solutions that the students provided for them are true product innovation
Yeah.
solutions.
And that's a really important message, I think, because I think you're right. I think a lot of people do look at it as, oh, well, I need some kind of entry level type labor, right? There's going to be a lot less of that with AI,
Exactly.
taking on many of those basic
Yeah.
tasks.
Yeah.
But I think there's an opportunity to take some of these students who have incredible skills, incredible education, technical skills, as well as entrepreneurial skills and everything else, and give them real world experience to solve real world problems. So the employer that comes to you and says, I have a problem, can you help me solve it?
Yeah.
Like that's a win, isn't it?
Yeah.
If we can get to that stage. Yeah, go ahead.
And I'll just throw something in too. I think this is a really important point, is that it's not necessarily just about showing young people how to work.
Right.
It's about helping them understand what it's like to belong to a workplace.
Right.
To be passionate about what you do, to be interested, to be flexible, to be creative, to be entrepreneurial. And they have tons of ideas. And I mean, our organization has always had young people in all kinds of forms of experiential learning from high school onwards, and they have great ideas and they have great motivation. And what we hear from our people that go out to our grade 9 and 10 career conversations across Ontario, they say, I came because I thought I was going to help some young people understand what a career pathway looks like and what my journey looks like. But I'm leaving so excited about the future. I'm leaving, with thinking about taking a co-op student. And I'm leaving just so excited about how fabulous our young people are. And we need more of that to help us all move in a direction where we can embrace the innovation and the creativity of our young people and see how they'll fit and how they'll create the future of work.
Right.
Just to be a little bit of a contrarian on the point that AI is going to start replacing some of these entry level jobs, I actually think that that's a little bit overblown in the Ontario context. While it's true globally, and we'll definitely see it a lot in the States, in Ontario, AI adoption is like super low. Way lower than the OECD average,
Right.
And
something we need to change.
We need to change. And the thing is that going back to the Minister of Finance, well, if you want to increase productivity and you want more businesses to invest in AI adoption, well, one of the best catalysts for change is bringing a young person into your business.
Yeah.
And so you can train them on AI, then place them at a small business, and then they can implement something that's relevant to that business. And then that small business has now a new AI tool, which has increased their productivity. And so it becomes a snowballing effect.
Yeah.
And so I actually think that our businesses are going to really struggle to do AI adoption, because from what I was saying earlier, that most of them are too busy, fixing whatever fire is happening at their place of work that day.
True.
Right. So.
Yeah, well, it's true. And particularly at a time when we saw this in our most recent Ontario economic report, that even businesses that did pretty well in revenue and profitability terms in 2025, they underinvested in technology and productivity, right?
Yeah.
And you can't entirely blame them when there's so much uncertainty around them. They're conserving their cash, right? But there's a low cost, high impact way potentially to bring innovation and fresh ideas into the workplace, as well as young people who have very strong technology skills. It's such a good point. Thank you all for an incredible conversation today. And I know it's not a conversation that ends here. It's a conversation and a partnership that's going to continue as we try to keep bringing workers and employers and government and institutions together to talk about how we can develop the skills we need for Ontario's future. But there are a few things that really struck me today, and probably the biggest was just how critical skills development and work integrated learning are to some of the big conversations we're having in society today, right? Whether it's about improving our productivity, strengthening our economy, becoming more innovative, adopting AI, or solving the challenge of youth unemployment, it's key to so many of these things and so important to our businesses, because we need workers who can deliver value on day one. So where there's a will, there's a way. And it's my great pleasure to work with all of you and to thank you for participating today. Anna Serrano, President and Vice Chancellor of OCAD University, Kelly Hoey from ApprenticeSearch.com and Hayek, and Noor Haj from Civic Connect, great leaders and great partners as we tackle these big issues together. I'm Daniel Tisch, President of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. Please join us next time for the next episode of Commerce Talks.